back to my brief look at the noise patch that I created for the Beams NoiseFest this past August in Edmonton. Last time around, we took a look at the first part of the patch based on the VCF as an oscillator being patched into our Dope for Bit Crusher effect and then being panned and heading on to the mixer and then onto our reverb being controlled by both our Wii joystick and our Dope for joystick. Next, we're going to look at the second voice in the patch, the heart of which is the Dope for stereo multimode VCF. What's cool about the VCF is that by modulating each of the two sides of the stereo filter, we can create a subtle panning effect. So to hear it, we just go back to our Dope for switches. If we push it up, we can hear it kind of starting to kick in. And what we're listening to is the Dope for stereo multimode VCF low pass output with the Q or the resonance cranked up so it's oscillating, and I'm controlling the frequency of this filter and the separate frequencies of the stereo filters in different ways. Firstly, my right hand antenna controls the frequency of the filter overall. But you can hear that it's still being modulated in pitch, and that modulation comes from the output of the first voice's oscillator, which is another 121 mini-sized VCF. So then I can use the two antennas to control the modulating frequency and the destination frequency. So it's a little bit like a simple FM synth with a modulator and a carrier, but I'm actually modulating two carriers in stereo. So then to create the stereo effect, if I bring up the delta FM, then one of my LFOs will modulate the two filters delta, which brings one up in frequency while the other one goes down, and then vice versa. And you can hear that as a slight panning if you're listening in stereo or with headphones. So the more I modulate that delta, the more noticeable the panning, but the more the frequencies of those filters change. I'll go back to a very subtle setting. And then once again, the output of those heads into our mixer and is panned in stereo, and then from there into the effects. So I can add a little bit of reverb. And of course, I can bring in the noise that I'm using to modulate the first voice's VCF, which will then in turn be passed on as modulation to my stereo filters. Once I'd gotten this far, then I wanted to look for ways that I could create different timbres out of the effect that I was getting, since essentially what I'm doing is modulating sine waves. So, of course, a wave folder was the way to go. I chose an IntelliGel bifold because it will function as two different styles of wavefolding in full stereo. So I'm using the output of the Dope for Stereo multimode filter that goes into the bifold. It goes through the switch and then onto the mixer. So that means if I pull the switch down to the middle position, that turns it off in case I just want to listen to my first voice. But if I pull it to the bottom, now what I'm doing is I'm listening to wave-folded, modulated sine waves coming from the A121S in stereo. And again, I've got that same washed out reverb effect available. So then, because I've got the Wii controller available, and it can still do more from me, I also patched some of the buttons out into this voices configuration so that I could get it to do some things for me. So one of the things that I did was I used the big button Z on the bottom of the Wii controller, and I patched that in so that its high voltage would turn up the wavefolding. And then what this does is it gives me a button-controlled pulser. So I was able to use this to great effect to bring in little bits of wave-folded stereo filtering whenever I needed it, and even mix that in with the first voice. Back to the second voice, the other thing that I did is I used the smaller button, the C button, into one of the many inputs in the Dope for 121 stereo multimode filter. And I encourage you to check out my 4-video series on the filter that takes a look at all the CV possibilities on this amazingly designed filter. So I've got so many different inputs that I can modulate things with, be they filter type or frequency. I was able to come into one of these extra inputs with this button and then simply bias the filter frequency up really high, which means I can bias it up without having to get my right hand over to the antenna. So all in all, this gave me quite a controllable palette of noise-based sound creation, because what I was really looking at for was a way to have a wide range of control over multiple noise sources so that I could use that control to kind of create a form for my 20-minute long performance. So that about wraps up a look at what's going on with my patch. I'll post a link to the final video of my performance at the end of this video. I just want to say thank you to all my Patreons for sticking it out with me as I've been busy this summer working on other projects. Please feel free to reach out. I can't thank you enough for all of your support. And please, to everyone who's seeing this video, check out some of my other videos, including my series on creating polyphonic modular, with the new Dope for Poly modules available, and check out my videos on the creation of YouTube's largest patch, the Kralberg variations. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.